It was a cold morning in Chicago, the kind that crept into your bones no matter how many layers you wore. The wind whipped through the narrow alleys, carrying with it the faint smell of exhaust, stale coffee, and something else. Something metallic and sharp. The towering gray buildings stood like silent witnesses to the secrets hidden within their walls. On West Huron Street, nestled between an aging laundromat and a boarded-up corner store, stood an old red brick apartment building. Its cracked facade and rusted fire escapes hinted at years of neglect. Inside apartment 3B, the scene was quiet. Too quiet. The blinds were half drawn, casting thin lines of dim light across the small, cluttered living room. A single lamp flickered near an overstuffed couch, its yellow glow unable to chase away the growing shadows. On the stained carpet lay the body of Emily Saunders, a woman in her early 30s. She was sprawled awkwardly, her eyes wide open, staring at nothing. The room smelled of spilled wine, mildew, and something unmistakably darker, the coppery tang of blood. Detective Marcus Doyle arrived at the scene just after 7 a.m. He was a man shaped by years of chasing the truth through the underbelly of Chicago, his sharp eyes missing nothing. The call had come in from a neighbor, Mrs. Patel, who lived directly across the hall. She complained of a foul smell seeping through the thin walls, strong enough to wake her in the middle of the night. Doyle stepped over the threshold, his polished shoes contrasting with the dirty floor beneath him. The forensic team worked quietly around the body, snapping photos, collecting fibers, and dusting for prints. Emily's face told a story of surprise and fear frozen in her final moments. There were no signs of forced entry, no struggle, just a single, clean wound at the base of her skull. It was efficient, almost clinical. Doyle knew this wasn't random. This was personal. Emily had lived in the building for just under a year. She worked as a freelance graphic designer, rarely seen but always polite, according to the few neighbors who noticed her. She paid her rent on time, kept to herself, and had no known enemies. But everyone had secrets. Doyle believed that, and he was rarely wrong. The landlord, Robert Kessler, was a man in his late 40s with thinning hair and a smile that never reached his eyes. He arrived shortly after the police, his expression carefully composed, but his hands trembling slightly. He claimed he had last seen Emily a few days ago when she reported a leaky faucet. Doyle noted his nervous glances, how he avoided looking directly at the body, and the faint smell of sweat despite the cold. The initial report listed the cause of death as blunt force trauma. No valuables were missing, and there were no signs of a break-in. Doyle found a stack of unopened mail on the small kitchen table, a laptop left on but locked, and an old journal tucked under the mattress. He bagged the journal, knowing it might hold more than grocery lists or casual thoughts. Neighbors offered little useful information. Some heard muffled noises days ago, but nothing alarming. Others hadn't seen Emily in over a week, assuming she was away or busy. Doyle wasn't satisfied. There was a gap in the timeline, and he needed to fill it. Back at the precinct, Doyle reviewed Emily's background. No criminal record, no significant debts, no recent romantic relationships. Her parents lived out of state, and she had a sister in Seattle. Nothing pointed to a motive, but Doyle's instincts whispered otherwise. He returned to the apartment later that evening, alone this time, letting the silence speak. He noticed things others missed. A faint scratch near the door handle, a tiny smear of something dark under the bathroom sink, and the faintest outline of a missing picture frame on the wall. Emily had been hiding something, and whatever it was had gotten her killed. The next step was clear. Talk to Robert Kessler again. Doyle believed the landlord knew more than he let on. His nervousness wasn't just shock, it was fear. But fear of what? Or who? As Doyle stared out over the city from Emily's small, cold apartment, he knew this was just the beginning. The truth was buried somewhere beneath the layers of lies, fear, and silence, and he was going to dig until he found it. The detective returned to the red brick apartment building the following morning. The cold had not eased, and the city wore its usual gray mask. Doyle's mind was sharp despite the restless night. Robert Kessler's uneasy demeanor had left a mark, a loose thread in a tapestry that Doyle was determined to unravel. Kessler's apartment was on the ground floor, tucked behind a maintenance closet filled with rusted tools and old paint cans. The door creaked as Doyle knocked. Kessler answered quickly, his face pale, dark circles under his eyes betraying sleeplessness. He invited Doyle inside with a forced politeness, his fingers nervously fidgeting with the hem of his sweater. The apartment mirrored Kessler's demeanor, bare, functional, devoid of warmth. A small table with one chair, a battered couch, and a dusty bookshelf lined with outdated manuals. Doyle observed everything, noting the absence of personal items, family photos, or anything suggesting a life beyond routine. Doyle questioned Kessler about his whereabouts on the night of Emily Saunders' death. Kessler claimed he had been home, working on tenant paperwork and repairing a faulty heater in the basement. No one could verify his alibi. His answers were precise but rehearsed, lacking the natural hesitation of genuine recollection. After leaving Kessler's apartment, Doyle requested access to the building's maintenance logs. They were disorganized, scribbled notes with inconsistent dates. The entry for the night in question mentioned a heater repair but lacked detail. No time, no signature, just a vague note in smudged ink. Doyle shifted focus to the other tenants. He spoke with Mrs. Patel again, who mentioned seeing Kessler near Emily's apartment late at night 2 days before the discovery of her body. She recalled hearing faint voices, though she couldn't make out the words. Another tenant, Mr. Delgado, mentioned hearing footsteps on the stairs around midnight, heavier than usual, as if someone was carrying something. Back at the office, Doyle reviewed Emily's journal more closely. The entries grew darker as the pages turned. She wrote about feeling watched, noticing her belongings slightly out of place, and hearing footsteps outside her door. One entry stood out. RK knows. He's been in here when I wasn't home. I can feel it. RK means Robert Kessler. Doyle obtained a warrant to search Kessler's apartment more thoroughly. The second search revealed a hidden compartment on the closet floor. Inside was a small box containing personal items that didn't belong to Kessler. A delicate silver bracelet, a set of keys labeled 3B, and a crumpled photograph of Emily with a man whose face was scratched out. The forensic team confirmed that the bracelet had traces of Emily's blood, barely visible but enough to matter. The keys fit Emily's apartment, including the deadbolt. Kessler had unrestricted access to her space, reinforcing Doyle's theory that there was more to their connection than landlord and tenant. Doyle confronted Kessler with the evidence. This time, Kessler's composure shattered. His explanations crumbled under the weight of facts. He claimed he had found the items after Emily's death and kept them out of fear of being wrongly accused. But Doyle knew fear could twist the truth, and sometimes it revealed it. The investigation uncovered more layers. Financial records showed that Emily had recently withdrawn large sums of money. Her bank statements led Doyle to an abandoned storage unit on the city's outskirts. Inside were boxes of documents, photographs, and a laptop containing encrypted files. The contents hinted at something bigger, a connection that reached beyond the apartment walls. Emily had discovered something Kessler wanted to keep hidden. And as Doyle pieced together the fragments, he realized this was no longer just about a murder. It was about the secret that murder was meant to protect. Doyle stood outside the storage unit, the cold wind biting through his coat, and knew the real investigation was only beginning. The deeper he dug, the darker the truth became. But he was ready. The city had its secrets, and so did Robert Kessler. Doyle was determined to uncover them all. Detective Marcus returned to the precinct with the contents of the storage unit weighing heavily on his mind. The cold outside was nothing compared to the chill of realization creeping into his thoughts. Emily Saunders had stumbled upon something dangerous, something that connected her life to Robert Kessler in ways not yet fully understood. The boxes from the storage unit were laid out in the evidence room. Doyle methodically sifted through them, examining faded documents, photographs, and receipts. The laptop was sent to the tech team for decryption, while he focused on the tangible items. Many of the documents appeared to be property records, old leases, and financial statements tied to various addresses across Chicago. One address appeared repeatedly, an abandoned building on South Halsted Street. Among the photographs, Doyle found images of Emily with the same man from the crumpled photo in Kessler's apartment, his face now clear and identifiable. A search through public records revealed his name, Daniel Mercer, a former tenant of Kessler's who had mysteriously disappeared 2 years prior. No missing person report had been filed, and his disappearance seemed to have gone unnoticed. Until now. Doyle visited the building on South Halsted Street. It was a derelict structure, its windows shattered, walls tagged with graffiti, and the faint scent of mildew lingering in the damp air. The building was supposed to be vacant, but signs of recent activity were evident, fresh footprints in the dust and a broken padlock on the basement door. In the basement, Doyle discovered remnants of what appeared to be an illegal operation. Forged documents, counterfeit IDs, and a hidden safe bolted to the floor. The safe, once opened, contained more incriminating evidence, bundles of cash, passports under different names, and photographs of various individuals, including Emily and Daniel Mercer. Back at the police department, the decrypted laptop files painted a clearer picture. Emily had been investigating Kessler, uncovering his involvement in a real estate fraud scheme that exploited vulnerable tenants. Daniel Mercer had been part of it, but had tried to back out, leading to his disappearance. Emily likely found out the truth, documenting everything in the hope of exposing Kessler. Doyle confronted Kessler again, presenting the evidence. The landlord's facade cracked completely this time. Faced with undeniable proof, Kessler confessed to his crimes. He admitted to killing Daniel Mercer during an argument over the fraudulent activities and later murdering Emily when she got too close to the truth. His motive was simple: self-preservation. But the case wasn't over. Kessler hinted at others involved, suggesting he was just a small part of a larger network. Doyle realized that while Emily's murder was solved, the conspiracy she had uncovered was far from dismantled. As Doyle left the interrogation room, the weight of the case pressed on him. Emily Saunders had paid the ultimate price for seeking the truth, but her courage had lit a path that Doyle was determined to follow. The city's shadows were deep, but he would not stop until every secret was brought to light. Detective Marcus Doyle sat in his office, the dim glow of the desk lamp casting long shadows across the scattered evidence. The weight of Emily Saunders' murder and Robert Kessler's confession lingered heavily, but the case was far from over. Kessler's cryptic hints suggested a network far more extensive and sinister than Doyle had anticipated. Doyle began meticulously cross-referencing the documents from the storage unit with public records, financial transactions, and surveillance data. Names surfaced repeatedly: property managers, city inspectors, business owners, and even low-level political figures. At the center of this web was Victor Langley, a powerful real estate developer with an impeccable public image and deep ties to Chicago's influential circles. Langley's properties matched addresses from Emily's notes. Doyle noticed irregularities, properties bought under shell companies, abrupt ownership changes, and unaccounted funds. It painted a picture of real estate fraud, money laundering, and exploitation. Emily had been on the verge of exposing it all, and it had cost her life. Doyle enlisted the help of the Financial Crimes Unit to track money flows linked to Langley. Patterns emerged. Large sums funneled through offshore accounts, payments disguised as legitimate business transactions, and sudden wealth among seemingly average individuals connected to Langley's projects. The detective organized surveillance on Langley, monitoring his movements and associations. The footage revealed secretive meetings with individuals previously tied to Kessler. Doyle identified one key figure, Thomas Vargo, Langley's chief operations officer, who frequently visited sites tied to fraudulent activities. With mounting evidence, Doyle secured warrants to search Langley's corporate offices and Vargo's residence. The raids uncovered encrypted hard drives, forged documents, and a ledger detailing transactions that linked Langley directly to Kessler, Daniel Mercer, and ultimately Emily Saunders. One chilling document outlined problem management, referencing Mercer's disappearance and Emily's investigation. Doyle's pursuit attracted attention. He noticed being followed, anonymous threats left at his door. It was clear the network had reached and wasn't afraid to intimidate. Yet Doyle remained undeterred, driven by Emily's courage and the need for justice. Langley was arrested during an elaborate sting operation, and his facade of respectability shattered in the public eye. The trial revealed the extent of the conspiracy, a web of corruption, greed, and violence intertwined with Chicago's very institutions. Witnesses detailed fraudulent schemes, cover-ups, and even the calculated murders of those who threatened exposure. Victor Langley's conviction marked a victory, but for Doyle, it was bittersweet. Emily Saunders' bravery had been the catalyst, her life the price paid to unearth the truth. Doyle stood by her memory, knowing that justice had been served, yet the scars of the case lingered, etched into the city's history and his conscience. Detective Marcus Doyle found little solace in Victor Langley's conviction. The courtroom verdict had echoed triumph. But beneath the surface, Doyle sensed unfinished business. The network Langley had built was too vast, its roots too deep, to be dismantled entirely with a single trial. In the weeks following the conviction, Doyle remained vigilant. His instincts told him that the network's remnants were still active, perhaps regrouping under new leadership. Subtle signs confirmed his suspicions. Reports of witness intimidation, unexplained financial movements, and the reappearance of names tied to the fraud ring. Doyle focused on the ledger found during the raid at Langley's office. It contained coded entries suggesting the existence of hidden accounts and safe houses scattered across Chicago. With the help of forensic accountants, he began decoding the ledger, uncovering a pattern that led to an abandoned warehouse on the city's outskirts. The warehouse, a dilapidated structure masked by legitimate business fronts, held more than Doyle expected. Inside, he discovered evidence of ongoing operations, counterfeit documents, illegal cash transactions, and surveillance photos of key witnesses from Langley's trial, including himself. It was clear the network wasn't just about fraud anymore. It had become a matter of survival for those still involved. Doyle intensified his investigation, tracing the connections from the warehouse back to influential figures who had managed to stay hidden during Langley's trial. One name emerged repeatedly: Harold Denton, a city official with a spotless public record, but a history that hinted at deeper involvement in the network. Denton's connection to Langley was subtle yet undeniable: shared investments, overlapping business interests, and indirect communication through intermediaries. Doyle began surveillance, documenting Denton's interactions and financial activities. It didn't take long to uncover evidence of corruption, bribery, and complicity in the network's crimes. As Doyle prepared to confront Denton, the threats against him escalated. Anonymous messages warned him to back off, and his car was tampered with in an apparent attempt to intimidate him. Despite the risks, Doyle pressed on, driven by the same determination that had fueled Emily Saunders' investigation. The arrest of Harold Denton was swift but tense. Unlike Langley, Denton didn't maintain a veneer of innocence. His arrogance turned to desperation as evidence mounted against him. Under interrogation, Denton revealed the network's broader scope, a web of influence reaching into law enforcement, politics, and business. Doyle compiled a comprehensive report detailing the network's operations, key players, and systemic corruption. The report led to a series of arrests, exposing individuals who had operated in the shadows for years. The city of Chicago faced a reckoning, forced to confront the extent of its hidden rot. Yet for Doyle, the victory felt hollow. The cost of justice had been high, marked by personal sacrifice and the haunting memory of those who had died seeking the truth. As he stood overlooking the city skyline, Doyle reflected on the fragile nature of justice, the resilience of corruption, and the enduring courage of people like Emily Saunders. In the end, Doyle understood that his work was never truly done. The shadows would always exist, but as long as he could shine a light into their depths, there was hope for something better. Detective Marcus Doyle found himself engulfed by the aftermath of the arrests. The city of Chicago trembled under the weight of its exposed corruption. Public trust wavered as headlines detailed the intricate web of deceit that had thrived beneath the surface for years. In the end, justice was served, and that was all that matters. Thank you for listening to True Crime Pulse. Share your thoughts on the story, like and subscribe to the channel. Until the next episode when we bring you more crime stories, stay vigilant.